On my 75th birthday, my son screamed, "Everyone's sick of you. Get out." His wife then threw my birthday cake right onto the floor. The thing is, what I did next made all the guests gasp, and the very next morning my son's whole life pretty much fell apart. Hey there everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss my next story. And drop a comment letting me know what city or country you're listening from. It really warms my heart knowing how far my stories go. So enjoy the story. Today was my 75th birthday. The number felt big, important, kind of like an old oak tree. You look in the mirror in the morning, and you see it staring back at you. You see it in the wrinkles around your eyes, and the gray at your temples. Was I scared? Not really, it was more of a quiet confusion. Is that really me? Did all that really happen to me? My little 2-bedroom apartment in the city had this smell of brown sugar and sweet spices. I'd been in the kitchen since the crack of dawn making my sweet potato pound cake. It's a recipe my mother passed down to me. I baked it when I married my husband Jabari. I baked it for Kian's first birthday, and for every birthday after that, and before he left for boot camp. It felt like my entire life had that warm, sweet smell in it. For me it smelled like home, like love. I ran my hand across the old kitchen table where I used to roll out the cake layers. The top of it's smooth, but it's got all these tiny scratches. It reminded me of Jabari when he was young and strong, fixing a broken iron on it. And little Kian building towers out of wooden blocks. Today, the table only had flour and a rolling pin on it. And my hands weren't as fast as they used to be. The dough was easy to work with, warm, and felt alive as I rolled it out into a thin circle. These random thoughts, not real thoughts, just pieces of things, kept popping into my head. Kian called yesterday. "Mom, I need you to help me out. It's important. The car needs a new part. A really important one." He sounded so worried. How could I say no to that? I took out the money I had been saving for a rainy day, almost my whole Social Security check, and gave it to him. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best," he said, and then rushed out the door. I sighed, but not because I was annoyed. It was more of a motherly kind of thing. It's like a debt, isn't it? As long as you're alive, you have to help your kids. Even if the kids are almost 50 years old and you only have a couple of crumpled $20 bills until the next check comes, it's okay. I'm used to living on very little. I can live on rice and beans. The important thing is that they're okay. One by one, the cake layers went into the oven, and the apartment filled up with that comforting smell. I looked at the picture on the wall. It was Jabari and me, when we were young, standing arm in arm next to the vacation house we were building. He did almost all of the work himself. He wanted us to live there when we retired, plant roses, and raise our grandkids. But he didn't get to. He died too soon, and I had to raise 15-year-old Kian by myself. I was a senior design engineer back then. I had projects, business trips, and dreams of traveling. I wanted to take a Great Lakes cruise, see Mackinac Island, but I had to give it all up. I had to forget about it. I needed to raise my son. I held on to that like it was a life raft. My whole life, all my strength, all my dreams that didn't come true went into him, into my boy. And now that boy is almost 50, and I'm still baking him the sweet potato pound cake. We decided to have the birthday party at the lake house. The lake house, of course. According to my daughter-in-law, Serafina, my apartment was too small and old, like a storage closet. She just said it, without even thinking about it, when I said we should have the party at my place. She was looking somewhere else when she said it. Kiana just shrugged like, "Well, Mom, Serafina's right. The lake house has more room and fresh air." I didn't argue. The lake house used to be mine. It's the only thing left from Jabari, from our life together. But I didn't go there much. Serafina and Kian had been living there for about 15 years. Ever since they got married. They fixed it up and furnished it the way they wanted. It was modern and trendy. Nothing of Jabari's was left. They even cut down the old maple trees we planted together. Serafina said they just made shade and a mess. Now there's a perfectly kept lawn and a fancy modern fire pit. I visited my own house like a guest. The guests started showing up around 3 o'clock. I had brought bags of groceries that morning in a taxi, and I was getting appetizers, salads, and pinwheel sandwiches ready. Serafina greeted the guests on the porch, smiling in a pretty dress. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and a little bit of annoyance. "Mrs. Okoro, why don't you head to the kitchen? You need to finish the cheese board and keep an eye on the hot dishes so they don't get cold." So I went. My birthday turned into just another day of doing things for other people. I stood in the kitchen, which I barely knew. It had shiny tile and stainless steel built-ins. I was slicing cheese and meat, and putting them on plates. Laughter, glasses clinking, and bits of conversation floated in from the living room. My name only came up once when someone shouted, "Where's the birthday girl?" Serafina answered in a cheerful voice, "Oh, she's our little helper, busy in the kitchen." And everyone laughed again. I brought out the plates, put them on the table, and then immediately started clearing away the dirty ones. Nobody offered me a seat. I was just part of the decorations, quiet and useful. At one point I sat down on the edge of a chair a little bit away from everyone. The conversation got around to the lake house. One of Jabari's old friends, Elias Dubois, was remembering things. "I remember Imani when Jabari and I planted that tall pine tree right here. Look how big it's gotten." I smiled. I wanted to keep that good memory alive. "Yes, and we buried a treasure underneath it," I said. "Kian was just a baby. We wrapped it in a handkerchief." "Oh, Dad, please don't tell those old stories again," Serafina interrupted, turning to her own father. "Kian and I are thinking of going to Turks and Caicos next year. The beaches there are amazing. The service is top-notch, not like these old pine trees and mosquitoes." The conversation immediately changed to Turks and Caicos, all-inclusive resorts and ticket prices. My buried treasure, a piece of broken glass, 3 marbles, and a rusty quarter was left there, forgotten in the ground. I felt something cold and heavy drop in my chest. I stood up and walked back to the kitchen without saying anything. I'd rather wash dishes than sit there feeling invisible at my own birthday party. And then came the big moment. Time for the cake. My sweet potato pound cake. I spent half the day making it. The layers were soaked in cream cheese frosting, so they were soft and melted in your mouth. I put shaved chocolate and pecans on top, and carefully made the number 75. I carried it out on the big round plate we got for our 25th anniversary. I carried it with one last bit of hope. Here it was, my symbol of love, my main gift. Maybe now things would be different. I put the cake in the middle of the table. It looked homemade, like something real. "Oh, Imani Sadia, why would you do that?" Serafina's voice cut through the room, full of disapproval. "We already have a normal store-bought cake from a fancy bakery. Nobody's going to eat this sad little homemade thing." There was an awkward silence. I felt like I stopped breathing. But then Elias Dubois, my husband's old friend, tried to fix things. "Now, Serafina, Imani's pound cake. That's the taste of childhood. That's a real tradition. I'll definitely have a piece. Give me 2. And that was the final straw. The word tradition, said in front of her trendy, rich friends, sounded like an insult to Serafina. It ruined the image of the modern, successful hostess that she had been trying so hard to create. Her face changed. Her eyes flashed with anger. She grabbed my plate quickly. "Tradition belongs in a museum," she said through her teeth. And right there, in front of all the shocked guests, she turned the plate over and dumped my pound cake, all my work, all my love, right into the trash can next to the wall. "We're celebrating the future." There was a deafening silence in the room. The only sound was the soft, wet thump as the cake landed in the trash. Everyone looked from the trash can to me. I stood there frozen and looked at my son. I waited, hoping he would stand up, say something, stop this nightmare. Kian stood up. His face was red and twisted. He looked at the shock in the guest's eyes, at his wife's satisfied face, and he found someone to blame, the one who couldn't defend herself. He turned to me, pointing a shaking finger, and yelled so loud my ears rang. "Look what you did! You've embarrassed us. Everyone's sick of you. You can't act normal. Get out of here. Get out. I'm telling you, everyone's tired of you." In that moment, something inside me didn't break. No, it just snapped like a thin wire that had been stretched too tight and had been vibrating for 50 years. It didn't snap with a loud noise. Just stopped being there. The ringing in my ears didn't go away. It turned into one pure high note. And a deep, unsettling quiet came over me. It was like the part of me that had spent its whole life hoping, making excuses, forgiving, and waiting for love had just been cut out, without any painkiller, by a surgeon's quick move. I looked at my son's face, twisted by his scream, and I realized that this is not my cake anymore. This is not my lake house anymore. And this is not my problem anymore. I nodded once, just a tiny movement of my head. I agreed. I turned around, not looking back at my son's red face or the guests' frozen expressions. I took a step and then another. My legs moved on their own, like they were following a path that had been there for a long time. But I had forgotten it. Behind me there was complete silence. I got to the front hall and took my old light raincoat off the hook. My fingers, which had been shaking while I was tying my apron half an hour ago, now moved quickly and confidently as I buttoned the coat. Everything was in place. I put on my scarf and took my purse. Inside was an empty wallet, the keys to my apartment in the city, and a handkerchief. That was enough. I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. I just opened the front door, stepped into the cool night air, and quietly closed the door behind me. The click of the lock sounded like a period at the end of a very long, very tiring sentence. I walked toward the bus stop, not really paying attention to where I was going. Streetlights lit up a lilac bush and a falling down fence. The world was somewhere else separate from me. Inside there was only that high, pure note. It blocked out all feelings. There was no pain, no hurt, no anger. There was just a clear understanding of things. An old city bus pulled up. I sat by the window on the cold, fake leather seat. Outside the window, the lights of strangers' houses and the shapes of trees passed by. And in my head, like an accountant closing the books at the end of the year, facts were being sorted neatly and without emotion. Not complaints, just facts. Here's fact number 1. My gold pendant. A gift from Jabari for my 30th birthday. It was heavy gold. I loved it. About 5 years ago it disappeared. I looked everywhere in the apartment, and I was worried and even cried about it in secret. 6 months later, I saw it on Serafina's neck in a vacation picture. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and the sun was shining on my gold. When I asked her about it, she just said, "Oh, I found this at an antique shop. Can you believe it? It's almost exactly the same." I knew she was lying, but I didn't say anything. Fact number 2, the money. How many times had I given them my savings for the down payment on the car, for fixing the roof of the lake house, for good tutoring for my granddaughter before college? I lived on yogurt and bread so they could go to Turks and Caicos to relax. They never asked me to come along. I was useful as an ATM but not as a family member. I looked at their photos, all tanned and happy by the blue sea, and I told myself, the important thing is that they're all right. Fact number 3, the slow removal of me from their lives and from my own house. First, my pictures were moved from the living room to the hallway by the guest bathroom. Then my favorite mug, the one I drank tea from when I visited, was accidentally broken. Then Kian started calling me Mrs. Okoro instead of Mom. Especially when Serafina's friends were around. It was like slowly cleaning off an old writing, so you can write something new and shiny in its place. The bus went over bumps in the road. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass, a tired elderly woman in a simple coat. And following behind this woman was a long line of words I never said, hurts I didn't talk about, and love that only went one way. A one-way street, and tonight I had reached the end. The gate had closed. He said, "Get out." A son's wish is the law. I would do what he wanted, really do it. That night I slept better than I had since I was young, without dreams, without worrying, without that familiar tight feeling in my throat. It was like a heavy weight that I had been carrying for so long that I thought it was part of me had been lifted off my shoulders. I woke up to the bright morning sun coming through the window. And for the first time in years, the air in the room didn't feel stale with loneliness. It felt light. It felt free. I got up, washed my face, and made coffee. I moved slowly but with a new unfamiliar purpose. I didn't make a plan. I just knew what I needed to do. From the old closet, I took out a cardboard folder tied with string. It had all of our important papers in it. There was the marriage certificate. There was Jabari's death certificate. And at the very bottom, a thick official document, the title deed. I ran my finger over the words that were typed. Subject of right, Imani Sadia Okoro. Type of right, sole ownership, the sole owner. I looked at the seal in the corner, and it suddenly reminded me of the blueprints from my life before. A memory came back so clear it felt like it was yesterday. I was 35. Jabari had been gone for almost a year. Kian, who was a difficult teenager, had gotten in with the wrong crowd, and I was asked to come to the company's main office in Atlanta. They offered me the head position of the experimental design studio at a big aerospace company, my own lab, a company apartment, and completely different opportunities. It was something I had never even thought about wanting. I sat in the office with the high ceilings holding the paper that said I was going to get the job, and I didn't see new machines, I saw my son's confused face. I thought about how he would be left alone in our 2-bedroom apartment, how I would be going back and forth between 2 cities, and how the lake house, which we had just finished building, would be overgrown with weeds. And I said no. I said, "Thank you. I can't. I have a son." I came back home and put all of myself, all of my engineering talent that I wasn't using, into taking care of that house, keeping things stable for him. I gave up my career for that lake house. The same lake house that I was kicked out of last night. I put the paper on the table. The memory didn't hurt. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final reason for my decision. I confidently picked up the phone. First, I called the number of the real estate agency that I had seen in the paper. A cheerful man answered. "Good morning, Guarantee. How can I help you?" "Hello," I said. My voice was steady and strong. I surprised myself. "My name is Imani Sadia Okoro. I would like to list the lake house and property for sale right away. The property on Maplewood Drive in the Lakeview Shores development." "Got it, Mrs. Okoro. When would be a good time for our specialist to come by to take a look and give you an appraisal?" "Anytime." "Today," I answered. "The key to the gate is under the big stone to the left of the entrance. All the papers are in order right here in my hands. Please do this as quickly as you can." "Understood. We'll get right on it." I hung up without any doubt in my mind. Then I called another number. "My only real friend. Desta." We had sat at the same desk in college. She was the only one who had always understood my family. "Am I?" Her familiar, slightly rough voice answered. "Happy birthday, dear. I called yesterday but I couldn't reach you. How was the party?" I quietly listened to her cheerful greeting, and then without any emotion, I told her in a few sentences about the cake, the trash can and Kian's scream. There was silence on the other end and then Desta sighed. "Finally," she said, her voice full of relief and warmth. "Finally, Imani. I've been waiting for this call for 20 years. They thought your patience meant you were a doormat. So what are you going to do?" Her question was direct, without any extra feelings. She knew the cake wasn't the real issue. "The agent is listing the lake house for sale this afternoon," I said calmly. Desta laughed approvingly into the phone. "Good. Very good. Now listen to me. They'll start calling soon, screaming, crying, trying to make you feel guilty. Don't answer. No matter what, let that for sale sign speak for you. It will say more than any words ever could." "Okay. Desta e Said. Hang in there, friend. You're doing the right thing." I hung up the phone. There was silence in my soul. Not the dead silence from last night, but the quiet, clear stillness of a fall morning. It was decided. There was no going back. Few days went by. Days of quiet that I hadn't known in years. The telephone on the dresser was silent, and that silence said a lot. I knew what they were thinking. They were waiting for me to calm down like always. To bake some cookies, come to them feeling sorry, and apologize for daring to upset them by just being there. They were waiting for me to call and say, "Kian's son, forgive your silly old mother." That had always worked before, but it wasn't going to work anymore. I wasn't waiting. I was living. I got up in the morning and did the exercises that I had stopped doing 20 years ago. I went to the store and bought myself the kind of cottage cheese that I liked, not the cheapest kind. I took my old knitting needles and a ball of yarn from the closet and started knitting. A simple scarf with nothing fancy on it. Row after row, stitch after stitch. The clicking of the needles was relaxing. This was creation. I was creating something simple, warm, and just for myself. On the outside, nothing in my life had changed. But on the inside, everything had. I wasn't just something that did things for them anymore. I was Imani Sadia Okoro again. Not just a mother and a mother-in-law, but a person on my own. I knew things were going to get bad soon. I didn't see it, but I could picture the realtor's car pulling up to the lake house. I could see the serious man in a suit taking a hammer and a big bright sign from his trunk. I saw him walking across Serafina's perfect lawn, choosing a spot, and then hammering the post with the words "for sale" into the ground that belonged to Jabari and me. That sign was my answer, my statement, my goodbye. And then, on the third afternoon, the phone started ringing. It rang like crazy, demanding an answer. I sat in my armchair and knitted. I watched the phone, which looked like it was about to jump off the dresser. Kian called, then Serafina, then Kian again. I didn't answer. I had nothing to say to them. Everything I wanted to say was written on that sign by the gate. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling to demand an explanation, to put everything back the way it was, but things weren't the way they used to be anymore. By evening they showed up. I knew they would. I heard the car pull into the driveway, the doors slamming, but I didn't get up. I kept knitting row after row, stitch after stitch. I didn't hear a knock. I heard a loud, unpleasant noise in the keyhole. They didn't even knock. They walked into my house with their own key like they owned it. That was the last thing, and it made me know that I had done the right thing. The door flew open. They stood there. Serafina had red marks on her face and neck, and her eyes looked angry. Kian was pale, confused, and his lips were shaking. They saw me sitting calmly in the armchair with my knitting, and for a moment they froze. They probably thought they would find me crying or upset, but they definitely didn't expect me to be so calm. Serafina got over it first. She stormed into the room like she was crazy. "Have you lost your mind?" she shouted. "What is this? What are you doing? You've decided to ruin us, to throw your own son, your grandchildren, out into the street." I didn't say anything. I just looked up and looked right through her, not at her angry face. I didn't see anger. I saw fear. The fear of losing the beautiful picture she had been trying so hard to make, using me. Kian started talking, using the soft, manipulative way that had always worked before. He came closer, looking into my eyes. "Mom, what happened? Why are you doing this? Are you punishing us for the cake?" "Mom, I'm sorry." Serafina got carried away. "But this is our home, our shared home, the home of our children. Where will we go?" The word "our" sounded empty in the quiet room. Our home, where I was just a cook, where I was something to be ashamed of, where my work and my love were thrown in the trash. I let them say everything they wanted to say. I let their shouts and pleas hang in the air and disappear. I looked at my son, at his desperate face, and for the first time I didn't feel sorry for him. It seemed like all the motherly love had left me that night on that birthday. All that was left was a clear, cold understanding. When they stopped talking because they were tired, I put my knitting on the small table next to me neatly, without dropping a. I paused my needlework, setting the fabric down after completing a single stitch, and only then did I respond. My voice was subdued, but in the otherwise silent apartment, it resonated with the force of a hammer blow. "This is not your home." Both of them visibly recoiled. "This is my property," I continued, my voice unwavering as I looked Kian directly in the eyes. "A house you've lived in rent-free for 15 years. I never asked you for rent money. I never asked you for money to cover the property taxes. I only ever gave. But I'm your son. You're my mother," Kian stammered, playing what he clearly thought was his final unbeatable card. I inclined my head ever so slightly. I knew my expression was unfamiliar to him, devoid of the maternal affection he'd always taken for granted. "The mother everyone is sick of," I said, repeating his own words back to him. The mother who embarrasses you, the mother who should just get out of your life. Remember, Kian, you asked me to leave. He recoiled as if I had physically assaulted him. And I am finally granting your request, I declared, my voice acquiring an uncharacteristic steely edge, perhaps for the first time ever. I am leaving completely. You see, my old-fashioned cake, my beloved lake house, my hard-earned savings. All of these things are integral parts of me. They're intrinsically connected to who I am. And since you clearly don't need me, you won't be getting any of it. They simply stared at me as if I were some kind of ghost. They were utterly unable to comprehend that these words were coming from their quiet, accommodating, ever-present mother and mother-in-law. Serafina opened her mouth as if to shout something, but no sound emerged. Kian just stood there, silently gasping for air. I rose from the armchair, signaling the end of the discussion. The decision has been made. The real estate agent has all the necessary instructions. He's already actively seeking potential buyers. You will need to provide access for property showings. You have exactly 30 days to find a new place to live, and to move all of your belongings out. I delivered these words with a sense of finality, knowing there was nothing more to be said. Everything had been laid bare. I walked past them toward the window and gazed out into the yard at the old wooden bench where I used to sit with Jabari. I deliberately avoided looking at them, but I could sense their world crumbling around them. A world precariously built on someone else's generosity and support. My own real world, however, was finally beginning to take shape. They left my apartment, leaving behind a palpable residue of confusion and resentment hanging in the air. I felt nothing but a profound sense of peace and quiet. I walked over to the telephone and unplugged the cord from the wall. No more unwanted calls, no more screaming matches, no more baseless accusations. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to be done had been done. The following weeks were surreal. The echoes of their collapsing world reached me like distant rumblings. On a couple of occasions, Serafina's anxious mother called, rambling incoherently and desperately begging me to reconsider my decision and to have mercy on her poor children. I politely informed her that I had shown them mercy throughout their entire lives, and that it was now time for them to learn to fend for themselves. After the second such call, I stopped answering her calls altogether. Then one day Desta called. Her voice was sympathetic, but carried no hint of judgment or condemnation. I saw Serafina at the county health clinic yesterday, she said. She certainly doesn't look like the Queen of Turks and Caicos anymore. She's aged at least 10 years. Word is, they moved out and found some dilapidated 2-bedroom rental on the other side of the county line. Kian took on a second job stocking shelves at night, and she's running around to job interviews, but after 15 years of being a house manager, nobody's really hiring her. They say they're fighting constantly, too. I listened without feeling any malicious joy or smug satisfaction. There was only a deep sense of inevitability. It was like watching an autumn leaf detach from its branch and fall to the ground. Its descent might be prolonged or short, but the ultimate outcome was predetermined. They had severed themselves from the very branch that had sustained them. I wasn't the cause of their downfall. I was merely the catalyst, a condition they were no longer capable of fulfilling. The lake house sold with surprising speed. Prospective buyers were found almost immediately, a young family who, according to the realtor, had fallen head over heels in love with the property at first sight. On the day of the closing, I sat in the agency's office, calmly signing the necessary documents. My hand didn't even tremble. When the sum of money, a sum with so many zeros that it was virtually unimaginable, was deposited into my savings account, I felt no burst of euphoria or excitement. Instead, I felt a sense of weight, a pleasant, substantial weight of possibilities. This wasn't just mere money. These were the collected years of my self-sacrificing life. This was my unrealized potential, my untapped career aspirations. These were all the beautiful dresses I hadn't allowed myself to buy, all the rejuvenating retreats I hadn't dared to take. It was all coming back to me in the form of a simple bank transfer. The very first thing I did was make an appointment at a high-end hearing center. I had been experiencing diminished hearing in one ear for years, but I had always dismissed it as being too expensive or something that could simply wait. They fitted me with a tiny, almost imperceptible digital hearing aid. When I stepped outside and turned it on for the first time, I froze in my tracks. I heard everything: the distinct crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the cheerful chirp of a sparrow perched high above, the subtle hum of the power lines overhead. The world came crashing down on me in an overwhelming avalanche of sounds I had long forgotten, and I wept for the first time throughout this entire ordeal. But these were not tears of sorrow or regret, but tears of profound rediscovery and joy. Then I went shopping and bought a coat. Throughout my life I had always worn practical, stain-resistant clothing, typically in muted shades of gray or black. But then I saw it. A trench coat of deep, saturated royal blue, the exact color of the Mississippi River at dusk. It was completely impractical for my everyday life, but undeniably beautiful. I went inside the store and tried it on. It fit me perfectly, as if it had been made just for me, and I bought it without a second thought. When I walked out onto the street in that new blue coat, I felt like a completely different person. Not an old lady simply marking time until the end of her days, but a vibrant, confident woman. Just a woman. And then finally I fulfilled my oldest, most cherished dream. The one that Jabari and I had held onto for so many years. I booked a 10-day Great Lakes cruise, sailing from Chicago to Mackinac Island. I vividly remembered how we had meticulously saved up for that trip, only to have all of the money diverted to pay for Kian's college tutors. "It's okay, Imani," Jabari had said. "Our son is more important. We'll still get there someday." But we never did. And before leaving, I did one more thing for myself. I found the number for a local community college online, and signed up for an introductory course in textile design, specifically in boutique fabrics. I suddenly felt a desperate urge to return to my artistic roots, to hold fabric and dyes in my hands once again, and feel the unique patterns being born under my fingers, to experience the harmonious balance that emerges from the seeming chaos of color. And so here I am now, standing on the deck of a pristine white ship. The cool river wind gently ruffles my new scarf, and I pull my beautiful blue coat tighter around me. The verdant green shores, the glistening golden church domes, and the quaint small towns slowly drift by. The ship glides smoothly through the water, leaving a long foamy wake behind the stern. In my hands I hold a sketchbook. I open it to a clean blank page. A set of colored pencils lies beside me, ready for use. I gaze at the mesmerizing ripples on the water, at the constant play of light and shadow, and my hand instinctively begins to trace a pattern of its own smooth, intertwining lines that resemble gentle waves. I feel neither anger nor bitterness. I harbor no resentment toward the past and no fear of the future. There is only this moment, this vibrant blue sky, this overwhelming sense of vastness, this quiet, profound sense of peace that is as deep and boundless as the lake itself. For 75 years, my entire world was confined to the four walls of my small apartment and the familiar kitchen of the lake house. I freely gave away my life, my money, and my love. They took it all, treated it carelessly, and ultimately threw it on the floor like that discarded cake. But amidst those ruins, I didn't attempt to rebuild the old life. I simply turned my back on it and began to construct a brand new one, and this one is entirely mine. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of my story. If this story resonated with you in any way, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments section below, especially if you or someone you know has experienced similar disrespect or mistreatment. Your support truly means a great deal to me. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming stories. Take good care of yourselves.